Okay. Seems that we have already started. Yep. Hello, Adam Matusiak. Hello, Bruno Oliveira. Hello, actually, everybody. Thank you for joining us in this panel discussion about the future of UX in digital banking. It's a pleasure to have you here. First thing which I would like you to do is if you could follow Adam Matusiak and Bruno, if you could write us something in the chat that you can hear us, if everything is working. And for example, say, where are you from? So we know how international this panel discussion will be. And we are waiting for Andras. He's joining right now. Yes, Andras is here.
Hi.
One first technical thing is that maybe on the top of in the red bar, you can see that you've got outdated, if you're using Chrome, you've got outdated version, but don't worry, everything is working fine. Let me give attendees a few minutes just to join. We already, Sweden, hello, Elena. Ruchika, Singapore, interesting, Portugal, Dubai. Hello, people, and thank you for joining. Okay, I think we are ready to go. Okay. So let me just start with a quick introduction about this panel, why we have decided to do this. The thing is that, especially now in times of Corona, it has touched traditional banking as challenger banking as well, and we can see that customers are switching to digital channels to use more mobile apps and web browsers. The traditional banks are closing the branches, saving money, etc. And another interesting reason why I thought we should discuss UX is a few years back, not many people, or the UX wasn't that known as right now. And I think we will hear about it more and more. Now it's becoming a buzzword. So this is the reason why I actually decided to invite those panelists which I have right now, because I think there's not better people to talk about this topic. So I will now give a space to introduce themselves, starting with Fadila. If you could say something about yourself.
Yes, thank you. Hi, I'm Fadila. I'm based in Barcelona, and I am a senior product manager here at N26. And I've recently joined the PM library in the past couple of weeks as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Stephanie, could you say something about yourself? Stephanie? Hello. Okay, then let's continue with James.
Hi, my name is James Cullenburn. I'm a product manager of too many years experience, most recently leading product management with Varo Money, a challenger bank here in the US.
Andras.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Andreas Schrung, and I'm running Ergomania, what is like a digital product agency focusing on UX, and we're working mostly on fintech and banking interfaces, retail and corporate both.
Okay, and Stephanie probably have a technical problem.
Hello?
Yeah, we got you back.
I got disconnected for a moment.
Welcome back again. But we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Now it's working back. Somehow everything crashed for a moment.
Yeah. Hey, as I'm saying every time, if some technical difficulties at the beginning of some online call, then it's not a proper online call.
It's true.
So don't worry. So now it's your turn. If you want to say something, introduce yourself.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie. I'm the art director of George for the last 6 years now. That means I'm responsible for the mission and vision of our design team in Vienna. And George is a pan-European banking platform by Erste Group. We have over 5 million customers, and I'm very excited for this discussion with you guys.
Thank you for the introduction, people. Okay, one thing which I want to say to our attendees and people who listen or watch us, on the right side, you've got the chat. So if you want to ask any questions to our panelists, go ahead and ask them any question. There will be also questions which you can upvote. So if you have some favorite questions and which you wanted to ask, but there is already one, just go and upvote it. And in the second half of discussion, we will go ahead and answer those questions. Okay. And now let's start with the first question on James. Hey, so James, you have been working in product management for quite some time now, and I'm interested if you could share some words how it was, for example, 5 years ago, how important was the user experience, how much people were talking about it in the company. How is it right now? And how do you see it in the future? How important it will be?
Yeah, so it's always been a topic that people have paid lip service to. Even 5 years ago, it was still talked about. I think there's a difference. The subtlety is in how it's been addressed and how it's been thought about. Historically, it was more about cramming features into the product and trying to get those in place. Whereas now it is a more integrated understanding of the customer's paths through the product and the features, and the interaction with the UI itself, and the design presentation of the UI, and the total customer journey. And it is the basis of distinctiveness. It's really hard to do anything useful for the customer if you're not focused on the UX. So I think it will continue to be the key differentiator, and ever harder to be distinctive, of course, as everyone copies everyone else in the experience. I think with there, at least in my perspective from the US, there is increased segmentation going on, and therefore, in some sense, the UXs will become a little bit more differentiated as banks focus on different customer groups.
Mm-hmm. Andras, do you have something to add on this? Don't forget to unmute yourself.
It's true that I think that's true that kind of unsegmented good UX won't be good enough anymore in several situations. So I expect also specialization, as we are seeing at neobanks, that for example Bunk and Revolut is going in a very different way, for example, and also it will happen with the banks that they have to differentiate themselves, but first they have to reach some kind of basic principles and standards also, and many banks, they still have to catch up to this point.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about the take on this of Challenger Bank N26, Fadila. How do you see this?
I think from what James said, this whole integration of UX, so it's not something that I see or the people I work with see it as something separate. Like there is no UX, department, or there is no UX specialist. With kind of all the product design and research, we work quite closely together to really kind of embed that within our ways of working, our thinking. And I think it's about this sort of end-to-end experience. I think even yesterday I was talking about service design, because we are a product and we are a bank, but we're also a service provider at the same time. So it's trying to get all those pieces together and really embed that in the ways of working.
And point of view of traditional bank.
So luckily when we started 5 or 6 years ago, we already had a big focus on the user experience, and we did this as a differentiating factor. So how can you stand out in the market anymore? If everybody offers you the same credit card for the same price, then what's the difference in the end? And we do this differentiation over the interface, so over the user experience. And what we discovered in the last years was really a massive, I would say, shift in the design industry from being something like purely visual, from making it nice, to something that actually has a high measurable business impact as well. So we bring back more value to business and to the user all at once.
Hey, this is actually really interesting because the user experience is the whole package, and I'm sure that you all guys could talk about this for hours, and it has many different parts. But what do you think is actually the most important key factor, in user experience? Is it design? Is it the features? Is it the onboarding? So I would direct it to Stephanie, actually. Let's stay with you.
I would say, because we're talking about banking specifically, we have a very specific challenge. And that is, banking is about money, which is anyhow a highly sensitive topic. And one of the most important things that we have to achieve with the user is building trust over the interface. And that's part of every step of the way. It doesn't matter if it's onboarding or doing a flow. For example, when it comes to something like a money transfer, we have to do these flows in a way that allows the user like very little space for any errors. So we have to guide the user every step of the way. This can be done contextually over messages, progress bars, or however. So the user should never, ever, ever be confused or insecure when they're managing their own money over our interface. Or another expression of this could be that we have to be very transparent with the users. For example, if there are fees, we would never dare to hide them because this would immediately create distrust, right? So you cannot do that. Or it comes to details like tone and voice. So every small text in the interface has to be clear and unambiguous as possible because we never can afford any confusion there. And the only way for us, for example, to ensure this is by doing relentless user testing.
This is actually an important point, what I feel from perspective of challenger banks, because Andras mentioned Bung, and Bung is trying to be really transparent about all those fees, not the hidden fees, but these fees, contracts, stuff like that. Fadila, do you have something like that as well? Is N26 trying to be transparent, and what's the game changer, let's say?
Yeah, for sure. We definitely, we want to be transparent, but also we have to be as well because we're a bank. I think that's I think it's one of the challenges is, for example, we have a feature called Spaces where you can move money from the main account into different ones. And then we have a feature on top of that, which is shared spaces. But that requires, if I share a space with you guys, then, you have to legally give me permission to, have access to that money. So blending like legal and, access rights and like that with a very clear and easy to comprehend user experience is quite challenging. And I assume it's the same for a lot of other challenger banks. But if you get that right, and I remember with Spaces, it's not even my product, but I remember like seeing the screens, and, we're going back and forth for a long time to, work with legal and work with, design and research to try and get those things linked in a very clear way. And I think that's important, going back to what Stephanie said, of having this trust, because you can have a really nice onboarding and it looks nice and it's doing all that stuff, but if it's not very clear, at the end of the day, we're asking people to put their money and eventually become the primary account, so you have to really have that trust.
Anybody from Gentlemen's want to add something to this?
I think also what is quite important in banking UX that to have very good initial research. So not just putting emphasis on testing, but to really understand what kind of functionalities and processes the users need. For example, what challenger banks they are doing better than the traditional banks, that they focus on features and processes, what the people really need, and they don't develop and they don't put energy into kind of very secondary features. And they can deploy like more advanced methods, just like standard interviewing, like mental models, Kano model, ethnographic research, and so on. And these kind of methods are still not in the repertoire of standard banks. And with this, you can create something what is really needed and demanded by the people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, James, what do you think about this?
Yeah, my observation, it seems such a basic thing, but it's always important to start with what's important for the customer and what they're trying to get out of the process. Whether it's starting from any interaction, what is the customer's perspective on it? Is it something that they are actually looking for some benefit from, or they just want to get out of the way? And then that's obviously a primary alignment. And then I agree with Stephanie's point about every interaction being an opportunity to create trust or lose it, or create confusion, or take it away. And those are absolutely essential in that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Hey, currently we have this strange situation. I think we should talk about it a little bit, about this coronavirus. I think a lot of people are getting annoyed talking about it, but I think it fits to our topic. I'm curious, what impact will coronavirus have on the UX in terms of what's going to be the biggest innovation in UX, which will be caused by coronavirus? Andras, what do you think about it?
In general, I don't think that like coronavirus will bring like big changes like the project range what we are having at the moment. So I don't think that it will immediately drive new type of projects. I think just like some specific type of projects will be more common and more standard. So for example, like onboarding projects, they will be quite critical to drive the people more digital and actually wants to be digital, not just it's hard for them. Or for example, call center robotization will be driven by coronavirus. So like replacing human talks and chats with voice bots and chat bots. I think this will be more common, and also like those type of processes that when they try to shift the branch processes to digital processes, I think they will accelerate. And I think it will be a special highlight on investment processes, because like investment advice is still mainly happening in physical interactions in branches. And I think this will and should change.
Stephanie, this is actually interesting point too. What I see from challenger bank point of view and traditional bank point of view, because you've got the branches, you still communicate with the people face to face, but the challenger banks already have this kind of advantage that they are only digital, only mobile, and they have to have this sorted out. Do you already have some plan how to make this digital, what Andras was talking about?
So the KYC, for example, of course. So we are actively working on becoming a customer online only. It works in some countries at the moment, and in some it doesn't. But for sure, this will be a standard in the next few years for traditional banks as well. Yeah. And our focus for the foreseeable future will be the financial health of our customers. So the challenge will be now a lot of people lost their jobs, they lost their income, the salary. And for us, the challenge will be, okay, so how can we now help them make the most out of their money? Like what kind of advice, relief or support can we actually give? What can we do? I mean, this financial health topic, it started way before the pandemic and is something of extremely high importance to us. And it will still continue even after life is, let's say, like back to normal or whatever the new normal will be. We don't know yet. But this is something where we want to put a lot of effort.
What about the N26? You already have the personal finance management tool categorization. Do you plan to build on it somehow?
Yeah. I was just thinking about financial wellness. I mean, as Stephanie said, it's always been there, and that was, I guess, one of the pain points that challenger banks wanted to kind of help, I guess, in a sense. yeah, we have like statistics and some level of financial management and what have you, but it's definitely something we've been looking at in terms of like what's happened. But even before that, something that we really want to develop. But again, it comes with challenges because to offer financial advice and those kinds of things, you have to be very specialist in those areas. And I think what we can do with UX, I think we can do to some extent, but it's getting those experts on board and seeing how we can really offer something on top of that.
This is actually a good movement of this cashless future that Corona is accelerating a little bit, the personal finance management and this cashless future. James, you have experience with account aggregation, for example, and data management. I'm curious if this Corona thing. What do you think about this? Corona, and what features should Challenger Bank have or traditional bank has?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what if I've learned anything about PFM and personal financial management tools is one size does not fit all. The needs of a customer in financial distress are quite different from a customer who's trying to grow their wealth and their total value. In essence, I think coronavirus will push more people into the financial difficulty, and therefore the emphasis will be more on tools to help with day-to-day cash management and actually paying bills and so on, and perhaps away a little bit from total value and where should I invest my money. So certainly a shift in priority. Aggregation is a tool in its own right, helping customers see where they have money in different places and seeing their total financial picture, and it's helpful. It depends again on the segment and the customer on what accounts they have in which places, but I think there will be renewed emphasis on these day-to-day cash management type offerings.
Mm-hmm. Hey, let's actually stay with you, James. One question which I think is important to ask, because we've got a lot of people from UX joining us, departments, and this is actually one question from our audience. Let me just find it because I lost it, of course.
No worries.
But generally, of course, I lost it I've got 10 questions here, but I remember it. The thing was, what's the product flow? How do you map the whole? What is your workflow when you are building a banking app UX? That's it.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question was, what's your workflow when you are building a banking app UX? So I suppose the question was meant, so you've got zero, you have nothing, and then you are thinking from step one when you are, for example, KYC, onboarding, then getting to the app, sending the money, etc. I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I have to confess that there's no singular workflow that happens in every case, because the source of the problem drives what the workflow should be. It depends whether it's a completely new feature that we've never developed before versus trying to solve a problem. I mean, there are some golden principles that, of course, we follow. So you start with the customer. What's the customer problem that we're trying to solve? Or sometimes they're internal problems, of course, for the bank. But what are we trying to deliver for the customer? And make sure we properly understand that. Talking to some customers is always helpful. I mean, there's some keys to that. Listening to customer service calls is a very good source of information in this. The goal of the product manager then is to bring that articulation, at least the high-level articulation of what the problem is that we're trying to solve, and what the objectives are for the feature together, and then engage the right group of resources to address it. And that can be very strongly a UI design, or it can be data flows, so it's really starting to get under the skin of what the actual problem is and what the source of the problem is, so you can bring the right resources to bear. So those stages of understanding the problem are essential. If you get that wrong, you're completely screwed. Then if you get it right, then you're okay, and then you have to move into the more sort of solution mode and working with engineering to get the solution delivered, with prioritization, of course, in between, which constantly guides what to work on.
Yeah, Andras, you actually work on multiple projects in banks. So what's your take on this?
Like the ideal process, I think it's an interesting thing that in banking, I think we are using similar approaches that what we use in other industries. So I think it's very important more that to understand that how these organizations, they behave differently. So when we are focusing on banking projects, we are using discovery, define, and design phases all the time. And I think it's more important to engage the stakeholders and understand what they are, the goals, what they want to express with that product or with that product change. And I think it's a big chunk of the work to kind of harmonize and align the user needs with the business needs, because several times they are contradicting. And I think this is a quite important part of the projects, that to make both of the groups happy at the end. And of course, it always needs some sacrifices on both sides, but this creates a balance, because if there is a product what just liked by the users but doesn't generate revenue for the business, it doesn't work. And the opposite, it's also will die out. What we actually experiencing nowadays, that the problem for the banks, that all of their products and processes, they were driven by business or IT and not by the user needs.
Fadila, do you have something to add? But
Yeah.
by the way, it's totally okay if you don't have anything people do that. I don't want to force anybody.
No, it's not exactly something in addition to that. What James said, it really depends on, what the project is, if it's existing optimization or something new. But then, working with all the different stakeholders, and I was thinking about my role specifically here in the Barcelona office, and we have research here and we have design, and we're very close and we work really closely together, even if that's defining the problems together. So I'm a product manager, and I'm in a sense quite lucky because I work very closely with business operations and legal, and I have good relationships with those stakeholders as well. And everyone is with the same goal in mind of whatever the OKRs are for the different areas. So it's quite easy to get people on board and get them really invested in the problem. But I think maybe the second part of when you come into the solution mode, it's sometimes can get a bit complicated there, because my team owns certain things and other teams, so you have to really work across multiple teams, and that can be a little challenging. But it's also fun.
Okay. Andras mentioned that there needs to be a lot of research done before, as well as collecting the data during, the product development. One of the questions were, how do you actually collect those data? How do you collect the users' feedback? I would say that this could be a question to Stephanie.
It's a very general question. I mean, there's tons of ways to collect it, like the call center,
Make it work for you.
Hotspot, or when you make UX research, then our researcher, for example, makes a documentation with Dovetail and then distributes it via Confluence to the team. Like there's really no way to stop it. I mean, what I would like to say about this overall, one of the biggest game changers, for example, for us in George over the last few years has been not only the research, but especially the application of data-driven design. So our designers obviously love the research, and we use it as a way now to measure the value of the design that we actually bring. By doing this, we can also change the conversation completely, because once you have this data, you can show what it is that you actually do and also see the impact that it has. So that's a big, big motivator for the whole team. So not only for the designers, but of course also for the developers, for the product owners, because they're all involved in this testing. Might it be, I don't know, there's like 50 million different ways to test things. It really depends on what you want to know. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And another big plus why we have such a high emphasis on the testing is that we can finally stop discussions based on opinions. And this gives also us as designers a much stronger standing in the team, let's say, because now it's not about, do I like it or not? It's really what the data says, right? And on top of that, we work in a big team. We like to have a very collaborative environment. We have many different stakeholders. So you could imagine we have 50 voices in the room. And we want to move the conversation from, okay, who is the most senior, who is the loudest, because that's the worst situation you can be, because at the end, who loses is actually always the user, to what does the data say about a certain topic, right? Because at the end of the day, all of us are incredibly biased. Like, I like to think about myself as the regular user, but once you start working on a product, you are not anymore, like, forget it. But subconsciously, I think we all create products for ourselves, or use cases for ourselves, or even design edge cases for ourselves. And that's why we always have to bring it back to this testing, because only the customer must be the source of truth for us. And that is only now possible, finally, through having a really nice and established user testing and research lab in George. So I'm very, very happy about this development.
I would also emphasize the need to kind of fully explore topics up front via a variety of means. We certainly used various tools. User voice is great to capture customer feedback, but I lost count the number of times where the actual problem was misdescribed by the customer. So if you rely on just the high level statements about what the problem is, you can go wrong very, very quickly. So you have to poke and prod at things to really make sure that the understanding is correct. So you even set off on the right track. So that's key. And then the testing with users as you start to develop your solutions is absolutely the way to get more objective feedback and guidance on whether you're on the right track or not.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe I have something actively to add there. It's interesting because when I look at like the CS report, for example, on most recent thing I've worked on is the ATM experience, so when you're withdrawing cash. And, you really have to go right to what the user's saying and try and kind of even investigate what they're saying, because sometimes the way they describe things is not actually what the problem is. So, it's been times where I've actually looked at like raw comments, even though CS provide reports and stuff. I really want to see exactly what the customer's saying. So I do that quite a lot. And even like a few months ago, I was walking around Barcelona withdrawing cash from many machines to the point where I was worried I would probably get stopped by police because I looked. And I was with two other people as well. So, and I'm putting the money back in the machine and taking it out and trying to really understand all the nuances, because, if being a global bank, it's, you have such a broad customer base, different countries, different use cases. So to try and, solve everyone's problems, it's not, we can do that, but to some extent. So it's always fun to kind of get out of the building. But we also at N26, well, before lockdown happened and quarantine, we have what's called feed forward. So every month we have users coming to the office, and we set up the ballroom areas, like a big sort of conference areas, like a speed dating. sort of thing. So we get like a product, or anyone who wants to kind of test something. It could be a screen, you might want to test a concept. It could even be some brand material. And yeah, we interview sort of, I think, 8 people during this speed dating round. And that, okay, it's not deep diving into certain things, but at least it can give you some glimpse and some insight into an area that you might want to dig into later.
Okay. So we are in the middle of our discussion. I would take this opportunity to engage a little bit our viewers, attendees. So just to remind you that there is a chat area where you can put questions and answers, or ask the question to our panelists. Then you can upvote the questions which you want to be answered. And now we will have a little pool for everybody to answer, the which challenger bank has the best user experience. And at the end, I will tell you the results.
I voted. I don't know if that was obviously.
Yeah.
At least you can vote.
Yeah, it was recorded. Yeah, good. Okay, I think now is the right time to get to the questions from audience. We already have quite some of them, quite a lot. Some of them are upvoted. So let's start with the top question. How do you tackle, Dilian, sorry if I pronounced the name wrong, how do you tackle accessibility in your products? Who would start with answering this question? 7 votes, top question. So I would suppose that Andras, what do you think? Can you take this question?
Like in the recent years, like accessibility became a kind of standard request in all projects. So some years ago, we had to push this topic into the conversation. And nowadays, whenever we get like a new tender or request for a new project, so the banks, they don't forget about this issue anymore. But usually they focus on the very standard requirements and very basic requirements. And we started to focus more on, for example, in the recent years, like voice solutions, what I think would help a lot of users to access their finances in an easier way, like not mentioning just the people who have some visual impairments, but like could extend usage situations for people also. And in several situations, like we can't use our hands properly. And so I think for us, mostly voice is the main accessibility issue. I know that there are a lot of other things, but like we focus mostly on this.
Maybe I can continue. So in George, in Web and App, in the last few years, we finally shifted also our focus on the accessibility. In the app, we are really good, I have to say, also thanks, of course, to the operating system that by default, it does a lot of things on their own. We also have a blind tester as part of our staff, for example, and we collaborate a lot with, I don't know how the English word is.
Try German.
Blindenverband. I don't know how it's called. Like blind people. It's not a club. Yeah, I'm sorry. I forget how it's
called. Or
how?
No, like it's association.
Yes, exactly. So we regularly collaborate with them and make user tests with them, so they can really, really use at least the app good. On the web, we have quite a bit of a gap, unfortunately. That's due to legacy components. But luckily, we have a tribe of developers who are really, really into accessibilities. And we are making a major cleanup effort there to also properly support our web users. Yeah.
Anybody has something to add? Okay, then yes, Fadila, did you wanted to say something?
Yeah. I think we have the same at N26. We have a team of developers, particularly from web, who are very into accessibility. And, you know, even in a recent design review with engineers and design, it was the web engineers pointing out, okay, we should change this because of, you know, these reasons. So I think it's like an ongoing conversation that we have.
That's awesome.
Okay, Sergio is asking, that's the second most favorite question. How do you fit the UX in your software lifecycle, i.e. dual track Scrum? I think based on your background, if I'm not mistaken, Fadila, I think we could start with you answering this question.
I don't think it's something that we kind of have to fit in as like a standalone piece of UX. It's kind of, you know, it's again going back to the one of the first questions around the user experience is kind of embedding everything from, you know, investigating the problem to then building some kind of mock designs and sharing those with the engineers. They're really good in terms of asking, you know, what if the user does this? And, you know, so we have those conversations along the whole process. So I wouldn't say it's something that's kind of slot in at any point. It starts from the beginning, and it's a continuous involvement.
Just to add to that, I mean, depends on what we're working on, but where possible, we try to bring forward the visual parts of the development, at least to get prototypes or even paper-based designs or visual designs that we can put in front of people to actually test and verify. It isn't always easy, or it can be quite hard depending on the project, but as much as possible, we try and bring that forward to allow testing and verification. It also has a way of crystallizing understanding among the wider group, make sure everyone's on the same page as to what we're actually doing with the feature and the development, so that there's no misunderstandings again.
Andras or Stephanie? I don't want to push. Don't worry if you don't.
No, it's an interesting question. I would just like to differentiate. For example, there are bigger features, and they can start 1 year in advance before any technical development starts. For example, then we start with the product owner and so on. Like James said, to do all the preparation, and then once all of this is ready, only then does it become part of the Scrum, for example. But if it's a bug ticket, for sure you do it then in a 2-week sprint or something like this. So it really depends on which feature we are talking about. Is it big? Is it small? And so on. How much testing? How much ideation time do we have for it? But usually the UX overall in George is just the integral part. There's now no distinction from any other part of the business, might is QA, engineering, testing, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I think in our situation it's a bit different, because like we as an agency, like we step into the projects usually in different timing, and sometimes we feel that like kind of surgeon whom they call too late, and we can say that we can save the patient, but we have to cut the leg or the hand or whatever. So like it's usually like when you're an external agency, usually they call you a bit late. So like they develop the concept, the business and the IT together, and like you have to raise your hand that, hey, you forget about the users. But thanks God the situation is improving year by year. So like usually the product teams are waking up earlier and earlier.
Another question from audience, from Ivo. How to find a balance between features and simplicity? I think that's actually an interesting question, because nowadays everybody's thinking what feature they will integrate. Moreover, the personalization is becoming a quite big topic as well, how to personalize the banking. And this could be interesting to hear your answers on this, how to actually provide as many interesting features like a personal finance management or some kind of personalized offers or something like that, yet make it simple. I will maybe, I just thought as a great example, Android versus Apple. Maybe some people will start to hate me now, but the Android, that's really easy to personalize, yet it's sometimes quite difficult, to navigate in all those options. In Apple, you don't have so many options, and it's easy to use. So what's the balance between this? How do you achieve it?
Just as a general comment, I think it starts with business strategy. It's like what customers are you trying to address with your channels? Is it intended as a universal solution for all the customers, or are you actually segmented the offering in the first place? And as a product manager, you sometimes get to set that, and sometimes you have to accept it. So but that is the original challenge. If you have a narrow focus, then obviously you don't have to cram in as many features. If you're trying to be a universal offering, then you're being asked to support the widest set of customer needs, and then you have to try and apply some techniques to narrow down the presentation of information and navigation options to the customer, so as not to confuse them.
Mm-hmm. Andras, I would like to hear actually your opinion on this as well, because you are at you are one of those who is creating these features as well, right? So how do you find the balance between simplicity and providing the right amount of great features?
Yeah, I think it's also like kind of balancing usually like different views, because like usually the business side is the side what wants to cram as much features into the product as possible, and people who are on the user side try to cut off these functions, and it's very hard to find what is the optimal. But I think it's also like in several situations, like good personalization is the tool, because like if you are creating like adaptive and learning interfaces, they have to recognize what kind of features they have to push in forward for some users and what they should put back. So I think this is technically possible in many situations, just we don't use these possibilities sufficiently. So I think this is the best approach to understand which user needs that kind of functionalities and playing with that and creating kind of flexible and adaptive interfaces, because like anyway, like if you just use standard segmentation, you can't cover every type of user. So it's better to build these interfaces flexible. And I think it's nowadays is possible because we have so much data. So we just have to use it.
Yeah, maybe I can add a bit to that. So in our George design team, for example, exactly this tension between business and design, it's just a reality, like it's part of our job to always challenge what business, which new features business comes up with. So we have to always analyze, see, does this actually solve users' problem or not? Because most of the time business comes with a ready-made solution, right? Somebody had a very great idea, we need this solution, and now you guys please make it pretty and let's go implement it. So here we have a very unique position that we can say, okay, first let's take a step back and have a look at the actual problem, just like James and Andras said. So by bringing in these design thinking methodologies, we do this by bringing in design thinking methodologies. So this can be done either in a design sprint or a user interview. If it's an existing feature, we can give proof by available data, for example. So our goal is always find out first what is the actual problems and what are the users' needs, and then coming up with the ideas, then test them and then see if it works. And by that, we can really avoid having this feature creep, this putting out in feature on top of feature on top of feature. Yeah. And the good thing is also, again, if you collaborate with your product owners in this, for example, do involve them in the design thinking and make them see it our way. You know, it's always a team effort. It's not us versus them or anything like that. So in the end, they become to a real problem and have an actual solution, not the other way around anymore. And by this, we create a much higher value to the business as well as to the user. And then it's a win for really everybody on the team.
Mm-hmm.
I would say. Yeah, but you have to have a healthy tension, I think, between business and design for sure. But that's also where it gets really interesting then. You know, everybody has to do their job.
Yeah, I think I can add to that is, you know, I think it comes down to the culture of the company and the people you're with. That also plays a big part. If I think about one feature that we built, actually it was purposely supposed to be built before coronavirus, and then we pivoted and we launched that as a test. And you know, I got a lot of emails and questions. Oh, this looks really great. Can we build another one? And can we use it for this and use it for that? And you know, and then some people ask, you know, the performance, and they want to know, okay, is this thing working? You know, what kind of impact is it having? And I think the more we can engage people with those kinds of questions and kind of shift the culture to that, then there would be less of this, you know, oh, we come up with this great idea and, you know, can we go and build it and make it look nice, as you mentioned.
Okay. Because we are going towards end, I will take last question from Bruno. How do you qualify success of your UX and prioritize new features? Is it feel-based or you have some measures, KPIs behind? Was it understandable? It's second question from the top, if you can see it. How do you qualify success of your UX and prioritize new features? Is it feel-based or you have some measures, KPIs? I'm actually curious how you know, for example, in mobile apps, what KPIs do measure?
I think it depends on the feature, right? I mean, everything we do will always, like, even before, you know, when I'm thinking in the problem space, I'm always thinking, okay, if we can solve this, and what would we like the impact to be, or what would we expect, you know, users to understand certain things better, or use a certain feature a little bit more. And I think personally, in my team and the teams I work with, we use a mixture of like measurable things that you can sort of quantify in a sense, metrics around revenue or cross-sell, for example, with the premium products that I work in, but also engagement, depending if that feature has a certain thing, but also comprehension, which I'm quite keen on. So using the feed forward or the user, you know, interviews and research sessions, trying to understand, okay, now we've changed this or changed that. Do they understand, you know, this much more than they did before? So I think it depends on what it is, but also it's good to have a multiple sort of metrics and key results.
Yeah, just to echo that and build on it, the quant is really important, and we often look at analytics and in order to get a kind of funnel analysis of what the new feature and what kind of dropout rates are, and if we, depending on what we've done, whether we've improved, reduced dropout rates is generally a good thing. But it's perfectly normal for people to dip in and out of screens or dip in and out of features to take a look at them. That isn't dropout per se. So just numbers on their own can never give the full story. But you need to be paying attention for sure. And then the feel side, the qual side, love to get the customer service feedback. That's always accessible through customer service. To get that feedback, it's always accessible and it's easy to get at, and then reach out for further feedback via user voice and direct customer questioning. and that gives you the full picture on the feedback.
Andras, what KPIs usually your clients want to achieve?
It's a bit harder in our case because like usually like the KPI are managed by the client side, so by the banking side, and usually we have like smaller impact on modifying and adjusting them. And also like several times we're working on a product, usually like in the first phase, and afterwards the product goes to kind of to a department what is dealing with operations. So like we don't get several times back these numbers. So we usually measure our success that they call us for the next project, not by concrete. So like we know that like we have done a good job, that like if our phone is ringing in half year again. So it's a bit awkward situation because sometimes like we are more relying in this situation on qualitative research, so testing and talking with the users, but like we don't get back several times the numbers, what is a bit painful in some situations, but we try to live with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Hey, one thing which I would like you to do, our panelists, if you have any final remarks which you would like to add, what's the future of UX in digital banking? Let's give it a thought for a moment. Meanwhile, actually, that's an important thing to say for our attendees. If you want to watch the recording, there's going to be a recording. One thing which I would like you to do for us, as making this panel, if you could fill the questionnaire which I'm sending, or my friend is sending into the chat, because we want to make it better and better and learn from what we do. So please fill the form. You will receive the recording afterwards. And for now, I hope I gave you enough time to thought the question through, and you can start. Somebody. It was a difficult question at the end. I know I am hard.
I have my answer.
Okay. Sorry, Fadila, please.
Go ahead.
Yeah. From a challenger bank perspective, it's to really, I mean, it's quite cliche to say this, but I think it's true. Like really focus on your focus on the user, focus on, what your kind of mission is, because there's so much competition and it is growing and it will grow, and that's great. But there's a lot of, I think there's a chance of, trying to copy or, take too much from competitors when they really have a different mission, a different vision and path. So I think it's really just focusing on your audience and what you are trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Just to take that forward, I mean, in some sense, the question is wrong, Shimon, in the sense of UX of digital banking. I mean, banking is digital, so I mean, it's not. In the end, it's more about the total UX for the customer, not just looking at digital. So whether that's involvement in customer service or any analog experiences that they actually have to have for regulatory purposes, you've got to consider the experience end to end. I think a lot of what the conversation has been, we've talked about the challenges of trade-offs. There's no real silver bullet in a lot of this stuff. But if you are trading off and trying to support the widest possible customer group, that's a harder trade-off than if you're more focused on individual segments. So I from a challenger perspective, the challenge is to nibble off the golden segments that you want from the incumbents, where you can be more focused on their needs, and you can have easier trade-offs to make to deliver for that particular segment than an incumbent who has to serve a much wider customer group. So I think the focus on customer segments is what allows the trade-off choices to be easier, and then an unrelenting focus on the total UX for that customer segment.
Okay. I promise next time I will try to ask better questions. Andreas, do you have anything final remark?
Oh yes. So basically, I think that kind of next step it will be a kind of standardization. So like banks and providers with mediocre bad UX, they will simply disappear in the next 5 years, because I think like it's what is like kind of good basic UX. It's kind of common knowledge by now. So like it's easy to achieve that level if you really want to. And afterwards, that like those players will disappear who doesn't meet the standards. I think this kind of specialization or segmentation, what James was highlighting, also it will happen. So like the players who will exist in the future, they will have some real character and not just good UX. So some of them will be strong on voice, some of them will be strong on investment or whatever. So because like you don't need like, I don't know, 100 banks with very good UX but looking exactly the same. And looking exactly the same, what is even more important.
I would like to maybe close with a challenge to our fellow designers, and that would be, I think all of us designers, we have to start creating value for business through design. I think that's so vital. We have to support this shift from making it pretty to having design as an integral part of business. And you can do this by using design thinking methodologies. I think there's so many tools out there, but no matter where you work, is it a bank, is it an agency, you really, really have to push for it. That's my challenge.
So let's do a second part of this talk, and then let's hand out our homework, how the challenge went down. Hey, thank you all. Thank you, Fadila, James, Andras, Stephanie, for being part of this discussion. I think it was cool. And hopefully have a, as I said, second chance to talk. I think that's it. Have a good day and see you around.
Thank you very much.
Everyone. It was really nice.
Thank you, everyone.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Should we drop the line?
It's gonna end in
Okay.
7, 6,